President Trump's former campaign manager may be in more legal trouble. GM is reportedly shutting down 3 plants that can result in the loss of 15,000 jobs. Lastly, Barbara Streisand and Hillary Clinton claim that white women who vote Republican are being brainwashed. This is A Better World, and I'm your host, Luis Acevedo. Starting off today, we're going to be talking about the report that came out from the special counsel stating Paul Manafort, who was Trump's former campaign manager for a short amount of time, who you may remember, he's been in the news quite a lot, not lately, but in the past. A few months ago, he made headline news. And so the report came out today that he has lied to the special counsel and the FBI on a variety of issues. And so now they're going to further investigate in him, and the plea deal that they originally had will be annulled, and they're going to implement more charges against Paul Manafort. Now, to give you a little context of what happened in the past and just refresh some memories, well, Paul Manafort back in September pleaded guilty to several federal charges that were held against him. And this is information that I'm reading back from on CNN, and this was published, I believe, in September 14th, 2018. And the title of it, if you want to look up yourself, is Paul Manafort Pleads Guilty and Agrees to Cooperate with Mueller Investigation. So this was a few months ago, 3 months ago, actually, 2 months ago, going on 3 months, where Paul Manafort pleaded guilty to several charges, and those charges included tax fraud, and I believe there were charges against him for lobbying for a Ukrainian president and not registered as a foreign lobbyist, also money laundering, and a couple conspiracy charges. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is not to only share what is going on with the Russia investigation, but to point out that this should be clear evidence to all of us. The special counsel investigation into Russia collusion is a complete hoax and a witch hunt. The reason I say this is because not one thing Paul Manafort is charged with has been due to Russia collusion with the Trump campaign in any kind of way, which is what the special counsel was made for, is to investigate Russia collusion or potential Russia collusion with the Trump campaign that helped him get elected, which I have to add, we have zero evidence on. Zero evidence. And now, being that it's past the midterms, everybody seemed to forgot that the report for Robert Mueller should be coming out, and it still hasn't. This, to me, seems as if they are postponing it because they have nothing to show for after investigating for 2 years. 2 years. They have nothing to show for. Now, what they're trying to do is pressure Paul Manafort into answering and lying to them to get what they want. They have already taken away all his property. They have already taken away all his money. They have already taken away his life insurance policy. They have taken away everything from this man, and he's been in jail since September, since he's pleaded guilty to the charges put against him. He has pleaded guilty to this. And when his lawyer tried to allow for him to be put on house arrest until the actual trial, they denied him to do that, which is wrong, because typically what happens is if you're not a violent offender and there's no evidence that you are violent or there's a risk of you fleeing the country or something of that nature, then you would qualify to be put on house arrest until your trial. The judge had no evidence of that. They disregarded that though and said, nope, you're going to be put in jail. So they've taken this whole man's life away. Not trying to justify what he did. He broke laws. And I think justice should be served. However, they are just trying to make something up on President Trump. stir up the pot more on the Russia investigation because nobody's been talking about it. Have you not noticed? Nobody's been talking about this. And now it's starting to resurface. Why? Well, because they have nothing. Now, there are some people who speculate that the reason they are claiming he lied about prior charges to the FBI and the special counsel is because, in case you didn't know, President Trump last week actually gave Robert Mueller answers to certain questions Robert Mueller asked him regarding the Russia investigation. So people believe that there are some discrepancies within Trump's answers and Paul Manafort's testimony. I don't buy this, but we'll see. I mean, they've had the papers for a week. I would imagine, being that the Mueller investigation being as top tier as the left presents them to be, that they would have came up with something a lot sooner. However, I understand that a week is pretty quick, so it is what it is. Maybe that isn't enough evidence to totally disregard that theory about President Trump and Paul Manafort having discrepancies in his answers and his testimony. Maybe that is the case. But even if it is, I guarantee you that it's going to be minute, insignificant to the Russia collusion, and it's going to have nothing to do with Russia whatsoever. In my opinion, they are going to keep this Russia investigation going until after the election. And if President Trump wins re-election, which more than likely he will win re-election, I believe that wholeheartedly, because the economy is doing well and people are voting highly in favor of Republicans running the economy over Democrats, which should be one of the most important things we care about as Americans, is how the economy runs, because that really dictates how well our lives are going to be in the future and for our kids and grandkids, etc., etc. So, returning back to the statement here that President Trump is being completely abused by our federal system right now. He is, by our Justice Department, and not Justice Department, but special counsel. And what they're going to do is, if he wins re-election, they're going to probably keep the investigation going, find some way to keep it going, find some way for you and I to keep funding the investigation when they have found no evidence whatsoever. But let's make it real clear here. When we were investigating Hillary Clinton on the email scandal, as soon as James Comey said that, well, what she did was wrong, and maybe if somebody else were to do this, they would be punished. But since it's Hillary Clinton, she's not going to be punished. We just drop everything right there. We drop it. It's okay. We won't investigate any further. When it comes to the Clinton Foundation, we won't investigate into that any further. We won't investigate in the fact that Bill Clinton had accepted multiple donations to the Clinton Foundation while he was in office, that the people who were sending in the donations benefited from relatively quickly after giving the donations. There was a billionaire who was going to go to jail, who was doing business with Iran and other Middle Eastern countries that were sanctioned. And guess what? His wife gave a large sum of money to the Clinton Foundation. He was pardoned shortly before Bill Clinton left office. Anheuser-Busch gave a large, handsome donation to the Clinton Foundation. And shortly after that donation, Bill Clinton made sure that the alcohol industry would not be regulated on advertising. So there is actual evidence to suggest the Clinton Foundation was used for pay-for-play. Also, in recent news, the Clinton Foundation has actually just stopped getting, or is lost $39 million in typical donations in which they would receive, since Hillary Clinton's no longer in power. So there's more evidence stacked up against the Democrats that they're doing things wrong, as opposed to President Trump and his administration doing anything wrong. Yet they keep this going. They keep it going. They keep it going to use it as political leverage over President Trump. That's the only reason they are using this. I guarantee it, because they have no evidence whatsoever, and it is sickening. Now, that's what's going on with the Russia investigation. We'll see how it turns out as it unfolds, now transitioning into something a little different, and I would say a little more pressing for you and I, is the fact that GM is shutting down some companies. They're shutting down companies in Ohio, Michigan, and Maryland. And President Trump had to tweet out the following, and this was today: very disappointed with General Motors and their CEO, Mary Barra, for closing plants in Ohio, Michigan, and Maryland, nothing being closed in Mexico and China. The U.S. saved General Motors, and this is the thanks we get. We are now looking at cutting all GM subsidies, including including for electric cars. GM made a big China bet years ago when they built plants there and in Mexico. Don't think that is going to pay off. I am here to protect American workers. So apparently the issue here is that GM wasn't selling enough of their vehicles in order to keep these plants up and running. Okay, that's understandable. I agree with what President Trump's stating when he is threatening to take away the subsidies. I think that we should not give any company that kind of benefit, especially when you may not agree with what they do. I don't know. I'm sure we all agree with the auto industry in that they provide us transportation, right? We all have a way to get to and from work, to home, whatever it is you use your vehicle for, or any other public transportation. We would agree that, the auto industry is much needed. But I don't believe that our tax dollars should be paying for that. And we also seem to forget that we bailed out GM back in 2008 from going bankrupt. And Barack Obama said, you know what? We want to get 1 million electric vehicles on the road by 2015. So in order to achieve this goal, we're going to provide subsidies to companies that are going to make electric vehicles, and we'll give tax credits to the people paying for them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, what happened is by 2015, there weren't 1 million electric cars on the road. Now it's estimated that this year that we will have 1 million electric vehicles on the road. And the thing that I disagree with is the subsidies, as I've already stated. I believe that we should not be giving any company federal tax dollars. That's how crony capitalism begins. That's where Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is correct. That's where everybody on the extreme left who believes in socialism wants to dog capitalism. They're right in that crony capitalism is disgusting. And it is a form of fascism where the state controls or has leverage over certain industries. I don't think the government should be giving any funding to private industries whatsoever. They should be completely separate. I do believe that there should be regulations in place to kind of monitor some bad behavior on a private sector behalf, but other than that, the government shouldn't be involved in the private industry whatsoever. I don't think that any company should be getting subsidies. So I agree that they should not receive any more subsidies, especially since that we bailed them out back in 2008 with tax dollars, and they failed to do what the subsidies were made for, which is produce more electric vehicles and make it so that way there are more electric vehicles on the road. They didn't do that. They failed to meet the goal, and they're just using tax dollars to keep their companies going. They're not solely, but in part, it helps them. They're receiving large sums of money from taxpayers, which they shouldn't. So that's what's going on with GM. Unfortunately, about 14,700 people may be out of a job because of this. So that's very unfortunate that people are losing work. I don't know too much about their plants in Mexico and China, but if what President Trump is saying is 100% accurate, I do think that that is a little concerning, and maybe there's some things that we can do to better incentivize companies in making sure their American-based factories are going to get top priority over Mexican and Chinese or any other foreign-based factories they may have. Should get top priority if they're in America. I think there should be incentives to do that. What incentives? I'm not sure. The only thing I could really think of would be a lower tax rate for business owners. That way there's more of an incentive to keep them here. And also, maybe, now this is a little extreme position, but I do believe if we were to do something with the minimum wage, as in abolishing it or lowering it, it would help out significantly in allowing companies to stay here in America, and it would also help with the unemployment rate. And there are going to be people who are screaming to their cars, to the YouTube, to your phone, whatever, however you're consuming this. I'm sure there's going to be people yelling at me for saying that or suggesting we should abolish or lower the minimum wage. I mean, quite frankly, the minimum wage isn't supposed to be a livable wage. It's supposed to be something to get your foot in the door so that way you can have some experience once you graduate school, or use that as a stepping stone to just gain experience so that way you can get a better job in the workforce as you work if you didn't go to school. And it would also bring back a lot more customer service jobs. For instance, as soon as minimum wage came around, we lost the person who would go out to your cars and pump your gas, check your oil, wash your windshield, do all that, was out the window once minimum wages were implemented. There's a lot of other jobs that have been lost due to the minimum wage. So it really hasn't helped us. It has hurt us more than anything, and has helped hurt the poor more than anyone else. So I believe those two things, tax cuts and lowering or abolishing the minimum wage entirely, would help companies remain in the United States. We also have to realize, too, that companies are not going to be around forever. They're not. Companies die and other ones grow. That's the beautiful thing of a free market. It's the beautiful thing of capitalism, is that if one industry dies out, there's going to be another one to replace it and maybe improve on that and do something better. So that's what's going on right now with GM. We'll see where this goes, and we'll see how President Trump, acts on that as the story unfolds. The last thing we're covering today is probably the most egregious, and that is an article from the Daily Wire, and it's titled "Barbara Streisand, Women Who Support Trump Are Stupid, Only Do What Their Husbands Do." Only do what their husbands do. Yep. You heard that. And this is a quote from Barbara stating the following: "A lot of women vote the way their husbands vote. They don't believe enough in their own thoughts." That's right, women. If you voted Republican, you are not independent. You are brainwashed by your husband. You are brainwashed by the white man in our society, and you have yet to break your chains of the oppressor. I'll continue. Maybe that women who's so articulate, so experienced, and so fit for the presidency, she's referring to Hillary Clinton, was too intimidating. Yep, that's right. Hillary Clinton, who apparently had a few seizures before, while she was on her campaign tour. She was spitting up some nasty stuff in some water. She had multiple health issues, no charisma. You were intimidated by her. I would be too. You know why? Because Hillary Clinton looks pretty frightening, and she doesn't seem like the nicest person whatsoever. And there is some evidence to suggest that she's pretty malevolent. Yeah, we won't dive into that too much. Now, Barbara Streisand is not that different from Hillary Clinton in that regard when she states that women are being forced by their husbands to vote Republican. Because Hillary Clinton has stated this, and I quote, "We do not do well with white men. We do not do well with married white women. And part of that is an identification with the Republican Party and a sort of ongoing pressure to vote the way that your husband, your boss, your son, whoever believes you should." This is part of the victimhood mentality the left is pushing. So if you don't like what they do, right away you're either brainwashed, you're ignorant, and you need help. You need help. You need somebody to bring you to the light. That's essentially what these two extremely privileged white women are stating is that you're ignorant, you need to break the chains of your oppressor, you need not agree with your husband, you are doing this just because you're told to do this. You don't need to do that anymore. You don't need to do that anymore. That's what they're saying. The only reason they're pushing this racial warfare here and trying to separate families is essentially what they're doing is because of this. This is my theory, of course. This is an opinion, but I believe that there's a lot of evidence to back up this theory. That is, the Democratic Party is losing the white voter rapidly, and now they are demonizing the white voter because they are losing them. And so if they can't win them, they're going to make sure they basically destroy their character entirely.